If you will allow it, I will fix it. Amidst the chaos of a global technological disaster unfolding before the entire world, that sentence echoed not from a chief engineer or a leading expert, but from a small girl in a stained janitor's uniform. She stood there, diminutive before the failing Stratos super aircraft, facing the powerful CEO, Alexander Reed, her eyes shining with an extraordinary confidence. It wasn't a plea, it was an assertion. An assertion that intellect isn't defined by a title, and courage can rise from the most obscure places. That moment initiated a chain of events that not only saved a corporation, but also uncovered a buried tragedy, sought justice for the deceased, and altered the future of an entire industry. To understand the power behind that simple statement, we must go back 2 years, to the day the sky fell on Sophia Carter. Even at 4 in the morning, Tokyo never truly sleeps. The city's glow from countless billboards and neon signs transforms the night into a thick, inky twilight. While most people were lost in their final hours of sleep, for Sophia Carter, this was the time when the ghosts of her past came to life. In a loose, grey janitor's uniform, she quietly pushed her cleaning cart, moving down the silent glass corridors of the international terminal. The polished floor gleamed, reflecting the giant silhouettes of airplanes parked on the runway outside. Each of her movements was slow, deliberate, almost ritualistic. This agonizing routine had been her life for the past 2 years. Every time she saw a Boeing 787 Dreamliner or an Airbus, a 350, her heart ached with a familiar pain. She didn't just see soulless machines. She felt their spirit in the aerodynamic curves of their wings and the latent roar of their engines. She once breathed the air of that world, an atmosphere thick with jet fuel and ambition. Now, she was just a distant observer, a ghost haunting the very cathedral she once worshipped. While cleaning near Maintenance Bay Number 3, her eyes caught a flash of metal, a small titanium alloy bolt for a 777's landing gear joint, lying discarded on the floor. Anyone else would have swept it away without a second thought. But not Sophia. She stopped, picked up the bolt, and felt the weight and near-perfect precision of its threads. She knew this was a sign of carelessness. In her world, one small, overlooked detail could cost a life. She quietly slipped it into her pocket, preserving it like a precious artifact. Her life was now filled with these small, solitary details. After her long 8-hour shift, she would return to a tiny, cramped apartment in an old neighborhood, furnished with only a thin mattress and a cluttered workbench. Her space was filled with countless pieces of old machinery, a broken grandfather clock, a non-functional toaster, a vintage radio. She didn't fix them for money, but to keep her hands and mind from atrophying in the silence. Beside the pile of parts lay her 2 most treasured possessions, a thick, worn leather-bound technical notebook filled with her father's formulas, diagrams, and notes, and a gleaming vanadium steel wrench meticulously cared for and free of any scratches. It was a memento of her brother, Liam. 2 years prior, Liam, a brilliant test pilot with a sun-bright smile and a knack for teasing her, died in a helicopter crash, an H-7. The official 200-page report concluded it was due to maintenance error, a small error, a human oversight. But Sophia never believed it. Liam was the most careful person she had ever known. He could name every single bolt on his helicopter. He checked everything 3 times before every flight. His death was an unsolved question, a dark void that swallowed her life. It had turned Sophia Carter, the most brilliant aviation student, the one professors predicted would change the industry, into a ghost, hiding from the world and burying herself in solitude and unspoken grief. Working late again, little one. The warm, raspy voice of Mr. Lewis, an elderly Japanese security guard who had worked at the airport for over 30 years, pulled her from her thoughts. He offered her a warm, fragrant melon pan, a sweet treat he knew she loved. "Thanks, Lewis," she smiled, a rare and strained expression. He looked at the dark grease stains on her small hands, then into her eyes, which seemed to hold a sorrow far too great for her age. He sighed. Those hands were born to build, not to clean, little one. His words, simple and genuine, were the only validation Sophia had received in 2 years of darkness. He didn't know who she was or her past, but he saw the true person hidden beneath the facade. In the employee break room, Sophia ate her usual melon pan from Mr. Lewis. An old television on the wall was live streaming a major event from London, the launch of Aeronova's new super aircraft, the Stratos. Though the flashy marketing terms no longer held her interest, she watched with detached curiosity. Unter die Desasterstruck, right on stage, in front of hundreds of guests and global media cameras, the Stratos' engine suddenly emitted a terrifying clanking sound before spewing black smoke. The systems on the giant control screen behind it flickered wildly. Aeronova's top engineers, in their expensive suits, rushed onto the stage with ashen faces. They typed commands, checked systems, but all was in vain. The cockpit door was sealed shut, the control system completely paralyzed. Sophia stared at the screen, the melon pan in her hand falling to the floor. That familiar panic, those helpless, bewildered faces, it was exactly what she had seen in the amateur news video of Liam's accident. The image of her brother's wide grin next to the H-7 helicopter, and then the image of the furious blaze that consumed everything, flashed through her mind like a blade. A voice inside her urged, screamed, a voice she had tried to suppress for the past 2 years, "Don't let anyone else die." In that moment, Sophia Carter, the janitor, died, and Sophia Carter, the aviation genius, was reborn. She shot up, ripped off her grey apron, and tossed it to the floor as if shedding an old skin. She walked with a new purpose, striding down the familiar corridors. This time, she didn't carry a mop. She carried a mission. She headed straight for the event area, where the entire world was holding its breath. Sophia moved through the frantic crowd like a salmon swimming upstream. Security guards in black suits were forming a human barrier, pushing back reporters jostling with cameras and microphones. The air was thick with the scent of failure and fear. She had no pass, no official capacity, but she possessed a certainty no one else there had. She slipped past a distracted guard, sliding into the stage area. She walked directly to the foot of the stage where CEO Alexander Reed stood. He wasn't yelling, but his anger was more terrifying than a tantrum. It was quiet, cold, enough to freeze the room. His face was a hard mask, sharp features carved from granite, his eyes sweeping across the crowd of helpless engineers, searching for an answer he knew wouldn't come. "Sir," Sophia said, her voice not loud, but clear and steady, cutting through the surrounding chaos. Alexander Reed turned, looking at her with disbelief. A small, young Asian girl in a stained janitor's uniform, her hair a bit messy. He was about to ignore her, assuming she was a crazed fan or a seeker of attention. But Sophia didn't flinch. She looked him straight in the eyes. "If you permit, I will fix it." Marcus Cole, a senior executive with impeccably groomed gray hair and a perfectly tailored suit, stood beside Alexander. He let out a contemptuous, unpleasant snicker. "Security," he barked, his voice dripping with scorn. "Get her out of here. This isn't a circus. We're facing a crisis. We don't have time for this nonsense." The security guards began to move towards Sophia, but Alexander Reed raised his hand, a small but powerful gesture, stopping them. He looked deep into Sophia's eyes. He had built an empire from nothing, and his key to success was his ability to bet on people. In this girl's eyes, he didn't see madness. He saw absolute certainty, an extraordinary calm, a blazing fire of knowledge. It was the look of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. He made a bold decision, one that defied all business logic. A decision that could either destroy or save Aeronova's entire legacy. "Give her 5 minutes," he said, his voice decisive, leaving Marcus stunned and open-mouthed in shock. Sophia didn't waste a second. She was led onto the stage. Ignoring the curious and skeptical stares, She didn't look at the glamorous aircraft, but walked directly to a secondary control panel the engineers had abandoned in their confusion. She didn't need a laptop or complex diagnostic equipment. She only needed her eyes and her hands. "The error isn't in the primary flight control system," she said, her hands flying across the touchscreen, fingers moving at lightning speed. "It's a malware hidden in the auxiliary diagnostic system, activated by a simple wireless signal. It was designed to create a chain of system failures that looks like a random mechanical fault, overloading the central processor." Aeronova's leading engineers, men with decades of experience, stood by, staring at her as if she were speaking an alien language. But as she typed a few lines of code into an emergency maintenance interface they didn't even know existed, the red error lights on the massive screen began to go out, one by one. A stunned silence fell over the stage, but she wasn't done yet. Just fixing the software isn't enough. That's just the symptom. She turned to the smoking engine, the smell of burnt metal acrid in the air. "Give me a 12mm wrench." No one moved. They were still in shock. Sophia didn't wait. She pulled Liam's gleaming vanadium steel wrench from her apron pocket. She quickly maneuvered herself under the engine, an action full of confidence and skill. She tightened a hydraulic joint near the fuel line, a hidden spot the automated diagnostic system had missed. "The malware targeted this physical weak point," she explained, her clear voice echoing from beneath the engine. "It slightly reduced the hydraulic pressure here by 0.02%, just enough for the temperature sensors to give a false reading and for the cooling system to become inefficient. They didn't just want it to fail, they wanted it to look like an accident." She crawled out, her hands covered in grease. She pointed to the engine's alloy casing. "And this alloy, it's too brittle at high temperatures. This isn't a manufacturing defect, it's a deliberate choice. It was designed to shatter when it overheated." Her words stunned Alexander. "Looked like an accident." The exact words repeated in the report on Liam's H7. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He gestured to the pilot in the cockpit. "Restart the engine." After a few clanking sounds, the engine roared to life perfectly, powerfully, and stably. The sound was no longer strained, but a symphony of strength. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Marcus Cole stood frozen, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. Sophia, without another word, quietly retreated, trying to blend into the celebrating crowd. Her wrench still clutched tightly in her hand, as if it were a part of her body. That evening, Alexander found her in a small ramen shop near the airport. She was sitting alone in a corner, quietly eating. Over that simple meal, he asked her who she was and why she was in Tokyo. Sophia only answered vaguely that she enjoyed fixing old clocks and mechanical devices. But Alexander, with a lifetime of experience in business, knew there was a much bigger story behind those sad eyes and skilled hands. As soon as he returned to his hotel, he instructed his assistant to find out everything about a girl named Sophia Carter. The results came the next morning, and they were even more astonishing than he had imagined. "Sir," the assistant reported, his voice filled with amazement, "Sophia Carter was the top student at the Royal Institute of Aviation Technology. Her graduation thesis on hybrid engines is still considered a groundbreaking work. She disappeared from public life 2 years ago, after her brother, Liam Carter, one of our test pilots, died in an H7 helicopter crash." Alexander looked out the window toward the planes taking off into the London sky. He realized he hadn't just found a brilliant engineer. He had found the key to a mystery, a painful truth he had no idea existed within his own company. He found Sophia before she started her shift at the airport. He didn't beat around the bush. "Come to London," he offered, his voice serious. "Work for me. I will give you all the resources you need. Find the truth." Sophia looked at him, her eyes, which had always been sad and distant, for the first time lit up with a spark of hope, a flame long extinguished. Find the truth. It was all she wanted, the only reason she had to keep going. Returning to London felt like a drowning person being rescued only to be brought to a deserted island. Aeronova's headquarters was a towering skyscraper of glass and steel, a symbol of modern aviation's power and arrogance. For Sophia, it was both familiar and alien. The scent of burnt coffee and the clatter of keyboards replaced the smell of jet fuel and the roar of jet engines. She felt like an outcast. Her return was not met with a red carpet. News of the janitor girl who fixed the Stratos engine spread quickly, but it was retold as a strange fairy tale rather than a testament to her talent. To Aeronova's executives and veteran engineers, she was an insult. They, the world's leading minds, had been outsmarted by an unknown outsider. They looked at her with condescending eyes, mixed with jealousy and suspicion. Behind her back, they called her the CEO's lucky girl. Daniel Reed, Alexander's only son and heir, was given an unpleasant task to supervise Sophia. Daniel was a brilliant financial analyst, a man who believed in numbers, hard data, and proven procedures. He didn't believe in miracles, and Sophia, to him, was an illogical one. He was ordered to keep a close eye on her, to ensure she caused no further trouble, and that his father's impulsive decision wasn't a catastrophic mistake. He watched her meticulously. He noticed her strange habits. She never took the elevator, always the stairs. Her lunch was always a simple bread roll and a cup of black tea, and she had a peculiar habit of dipping her bread into the tea. She was a woman of few words, often spending hours in the flight simulation room just quietly observing the data. But then, he saw other things. He saw the way she redrew a complex technical diagram of a hydraulic system from memory onto a napkin with millimeter-perfect precision. He saw the way her eyes lit up when she talked about titanium-aluminum alloys. He realized that behind her quiet and somewhat eccentric exterior was an extraordinary mind. He was fascinated, though he wouldn't admit it. Meanwhile, Sophia began her own investigation, a deep dive into the darkness within Aeronova. She requested access to the archives of the Hyperion super engine project, the company's most ambitious, secretive, and expensive project. It took weeks of battling with the legal department, and only Alexander's direct intervention got her what she wanted. She buried herself in thousands of pages of documents, blueprints, and test reports. The more she read, the more she felt a familiar unease. The technical specifications, composite materials, and even the pressure issues in the cooling system of Hyperion bore a suspicious resemblance to the H-7 helicopter that had taken Liam's life. They were like two twin brothers hidden under different names. She called Tokyo, asking Mr. Lewis to send her the box containing her father's old belongings. In it, she found it, the worn leather-bound technical notebook. Her father, a brilliant former Aeronova materials engineer, had retired early due to health reasons and died of a sudden heart attack not long after Liam. Turning to the final pages, written in a shaky hand, she found what she was looking for. They were his concerning notes about a new composite material, the one being used for the Hyperion project. He had conducted his own tests, documenting calculations on its durability and heat resistance under high pressure. Next to a chart filled with alarming red numbers was a hastily written note. "Must tell Liam. Too dangerous. Marcus won't listen." Marcus. The name was like a knife to Sophia's heart. She understood. Her father had discovered something, a fatal flaw in the material, and had tried to warn Liam. But it was too late. Her father's death no longer seemed like a random coincidence. One night, Daniel saw a light on in the materials lab. He walked in, curious, and found Sophia still there, late. She wasn't running experiments. She was meticulously cleaning the equipment, arranging every tool, every clamp, every test tube neatly. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, a hint of bewilderment in his voice. "We have an entire cleaning crew for this." Sophia looked up, her eyes hollow from lack of sleep, but filled with an intense fire. "I believe every detail matters," she replied, her voice filled with quiet sorrow. "A small detail was overlooked, and my brother died." Her words, simple yet carrying a world of tragedy, struck a chord with Daniel. He fell silent. Shortly after, he found her sitting at a workbench in the corner of the room. On the table was a broken control chip from the simulation system, something the entire engineering team had given up on and thrown in the trash last week. She held a micro-soldering iron, her hands steady, her eyes focused with absolute concentration on the tiny circuits. She worked with a pure focus and passion, as if the rest of the world didn't exist. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Sophia's words and image haunted him. He began to see her with new eyes. This was no longer a supervision task. This was curiosity, admiration, and a deep respect. He realized this girl wasn't crazy. She was searching for justice. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her. As Sophia drew closer to the truth, she could feel the shadows tightening around her. Marcus Cole, the man she always felt uneasy about, began to make his move. He no longer hid his hostility behind a polite smile. In meetings, he openly questioned her competence, calling her findings the paranoid delusions of an inexperienced person. He knew exactly who she was, Liam Carter's sister, the scapegoat he had sacrificed, and he knew she wouldn't stop until she found the truth. The trap was laid with subtle and cruel precision. Marcus used his power to access Sophia's medical history after Liam's accident. He knew she had undergone psychological therapy due to the immense shock. He used that information to attack her. He planted fake evidence, professionally fabricated emails, showing Sophia had deliberately accessed Aeronova's top-secret security system, looking for irrelevant information. Then, he leaked distorted information to a tabloid newspaper. A mentally unstable former student, obsessed with her brother's death, was trying to sabotage the most important project as revenge. The story spread like wildfire. The media swarmed it. Sophia Carter, from an accidental hero, suddenly became a deranged saboteur. Aeronova faced a major media crisis, and its stock price began to plummet. The whole world seemed to turn its back on Sophia. The engineers who had once secretly admired her now shunned her. The pressure from the board of directors weighed heavily on Alexander Reed. He called Daniel into his office, his face showing signs of weariness and doubt. "Perhaps we were wrong about her, Daniel," he said, rubbing his temples. "The board is demanding her suspension. The press is killing us." Daniel looked his father directly in the eye. For the first time in his life, he openly opposed the father he had always respected. "You only believe what you see on paper, in reports written by others," he said, his voice filled with disappointment, but also immense conviction. "I believe in the person I saw, a person who would rather clean a terminal floor than leave a single bolt out of place. I believe her." The heated confrontation ended without a conclusion. Daniel left, a sense of frustration welling up inside him. He knew where Sophia would be. He found her in an old bookstore in a small alley, huddled in a corner, trying to hide from the world. She looked small and vulnerable. He didn't say much, just bought 2 hot coffees and sat down beside her. "My father believes what he sees," he said gently, breaking the silence. "I believe what I feel, and I feel that you are telling the truth." Sophia looked up, her eyes red but without a single tear. For the first time in days, she didn't feel alone. From then on, they were no longer 2 separate individuals. They were a team. They worked in secret, often at Daniel's apartment at night, to avoid surveillance. Daniel, with his sharp financial skills, traced the phantom contracts and shell companies Marcus used to funnel substandard composite materials to Aeronova at exorbitant prices. Numbers don't lie, and they were painting a picture of systemic corruption. Meanwhile, Sophia, with her technical knowledge, reanalyzed every piece of data from the H7's black box. She ran hundreds of simulations on the computer. The final results were undeniable. The accident could not have been caused by a maintenance error. It could only have occurred when the main rotor shaft broke due to a microscopic crack inside the material, a flaw no standard inspection could have detected. They discovered that Marcus was the ringleader of the entire scheme. He had enriched himself by trading with pilots' lives. But they needed one final piece of evidence, something that could directly link Marcus to Liam's accident. The clue led them to an old warehouse on the outskirts of London, where the materials supplier had once stored records. They knew it was a trap, but they had no other choice. As they were trying to retrieve an important file from a locked cabinet, two large men appeared. "Mr. Cole sends his regards," one of them said, a steel bar in his hand. A breathtaking chase ensued in the dusty warehouse. Daniel, despite his lack of fighting skills, bravely shielded Sophia. They toppled shelves to block the way, escaped through a back exit, and jumped into Daniel's car. A black sedan pursued them relentlessly on the deserted roads. Daniel floored the gas, swerving through dangerous curves. Finally, he lost them by speeding into a crowded market. They escaped by the skin of their teeth, Daniel's car severely dented. Their hearts were still pounding, but they had what they needed. In the file, tucked between shipping papers, was a small box. Inside was an old cassette tape. They returned to the apartment, found an old cassette player, and hit play. It was a secret recording. The shaky voice of a man, likely a quality control engineer, and then Marcus's voice, yelling, full of threats. "You think a kid's life is worth more than $1 billion project?" Marcus's voice echoed, cold and vicious. "It's better that he dies than this project goes under. Write the report. Put down maintenance error. You hear me?" Silence filled the room. Daniel and Sophia looked at each other. This was it, the undeniable evidence, the smoking gun. They had the weapon to take down Marcus Cole and expose the entire conspiracy. The launch of the Hyperion super engine was held in a massive aircraft hangar, transformed into a lavish and modern event space. It was the biggest event in Aeronova's history, a final gamble by Alexander Reed to regain the trust of the public and investors after the media scandal. Hundreds of important guests, government officials, and global media were present. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation and tension, and it was the perfect stage for the final judgment. As Alexander finished his impassioned speech about the future of aviation, the huge velvet curtain behind him slowly rose, revealing the Hyperion super engine in all its glory. But instead of the usual flashy promotional images, the large screens on either side of the stage abruptly changed. They began to display Sophia's analytical data. Enlarged 3D images of microscopic cracks inside the composite material, speaking numbers about the quality discrepancy from safety standards, and simulations showing how the aircraft could break into pieces when flying at maximum speed. The entire hall began to buzz, murmurs of concern spreading like wildfire. Alexander stood frozen on the stage. This was not part of his plan. He looked down at the front row, where Daniel was sitting, and saw his son give a slight nod. And then, the entire hall fell completely silent as a familiar voice emanated from the surround sound system, clear in every detail. "You think a kid's life is worth more than $1 billion project?" Marcus Cole's cold and vicious voice echoed throughout the hangar. "It's better that he dies than this project goes under. Write the report. Put down maintenance error. You hear me?" The recording played over and over, giving no one a chance to doubt. Marcus, sitting in the front row, turned ashen. He tried to get up and run, but security guards, alerted by Daniel beforehand, quickly restrained him on the spot. Alexander Reed stood on the stage, stunned and heartbroken. The betrayal from the man he trusted most, his closest friend, felt like a dagger to the heart. The entire legacy he had spent a lifetime building was collapsing right before his eyes. But in that moment, he chose truth over concealment. He took the microphone, and in a trembling but decisive voice, he announced to the world, "The Hyperion project is cancelled immediately." Sophia was vindicated. That very night, she became a hero, a symbol of integrity. Her story was all over the headlines. A few days later, Alexander invited her to his office. He offered her a position as Vice President of Research and Development, a top position with unimaginable power and salary. But she declined. "Thank you, sir, but I can't," she said gently but firmly. "I can't fix a system from the inside when it is rotten to its core. Its foundation was built on lies. I will build something new." And she did. Together with Daniel, Sophia founded Project Icarus. It was not an aircraft manufacturing company, but an independent, non-profit aviation safety oversight organization. The name was taken from the tragedy of Greek mythology, a reminder to the entire industry of the consequences of arrogance and blind ambition when flying too close to the Sunday. Daniel decided to leave Aeronova to build this new legacy with her. He had an emotional conversation with his father in Alexander's quiet office. "I'm going with her," Daniel said. "I can't stay in a place that was once willing to trade human lives." Alexander looked at his son, no longer with the eyes of a CEO, but of a father. He saw maturity and integrity in his son's eyes. After all the losses, he finally understood what was most important. "Go," he said, his voice full of pride. "Do what you believe is right." Daniel smiled. "You taught me how to build an empire. Sophia taught me that some things are more important than an empire. That is responsibility." Years later, Project Icarus became the most respected and trusted aviation safety oversight organization in the world. Their logo, a steel wing with a broken feather, was a symbol of unshakable safety and integrity. At a seminar at the Royal Institute of Aviation Technology, her old school, Sophia, now a confident woman and a leading expert, was giving a speech. After the talk, a young student timidly approached her and asked, "Miss Carter, what gave you the strength to stand up to all those giant forces?" Sophia looked at Daniel, who was standing at the back of the room, smiling warmly at her. Then she turned back, looked into the young student's admiring eyes, and answered, a reply not just for the girl, but for herself, for Liam, and for all the lives she had fought to protect. "It's when you realize," she said, her voice warm and steady, "that you're not fighting for what you've lost, but for everything you can protect.